said, then we got to think, no, first of all, we realized that's not really Jason's boat.
Yeah.
But then we thought, who sent us this picture? We said, that's Robert. He likes to pull jokes.
Joking.
And so we figured out that it was you pulling our leg. We already figured that out. He said, but I didn't want y'all to walk around thinking we could really do that. So he said, I want to let you know I was just pulling y'all's leg.
Did you tell him about the jet?
No, I didn't think about the jet.
That jet was one of the highlights of the day.
You think so?
You didn't like it coming down the river banking and following the
Well,
river?
I know they're awesome, but look, yeah, I guess, of course, you know I was in the Air Guard. I've been on.
That was still pretty, it's something you only ever see on the river.
Well, you don't see that.
What the doctor say?
Surgery, April 1st.
Just rotor rooter type thing?
Yeah, they're gonna go in and clear it all out, rework some of the passages so they drain better, and the septum is over to one side, I think it makes things worse on the left side. So, we'll see how it goes. I've had a surgery like this before, and Donna's had it before, but we know we're getting into it. It's not fun. But,
Choosing to do it anyway.
So that's what do you?
breathing is something you get attached to.
We had 2 boys out of the 9.
Okay.
You still taking treatments?
Got 3 more.
3 more.
3 more and I'm done.
You get the target off your head.
Yeah, a doodling, yeah. No. I just figured that 15 treatments is better than a big hole in the top of my head.
Right off the
That
head,
was my
that
thinking.
sounds like a good choice to me too.
Hi here. So what you think about Big Ben?
It was great.
You like it?
Yeah.
Really?
It's hot, but the part we stayed in was in the mountains. The middle part of the park is a small mountain range,
Yeah.
about 20 degrees cooler.
Had y'all been there before?
No.
No?
For the
Okay.
first time.
So you walking off your national park with us?
Yeah, that's what we're doing there.
How many you got left?
There's 63 total. We've been to 52.
No.
Really?
So we think we can get to 55 without leaving the country.
Yeah.
The rest of the ones we can't get to are either Hawaii, Alaska, American Samoa, Virgin Islands. So we may not get to all of them, but we're hoping to get to 55.
Yeah. That's awesome.
It's a lot of fun.
We've been to like 9.
Alaska's a great trip. I would go ahead and include it in the
Yeah, don't mark
We've
that.
been
Don't mark that
several,
one.
and there's so many in Alaska that are so remote, like
Oh, there's several.
Kobuk Valley and the one where the bears catch the fish. I can't remember. Katmai, Gates of the Arctic. Those are so. I mean, you got to take a plane to get them,
Oh,
and I mean, there's no roads,
yeah.
so
I didn't realize there was any that remote.
yeah, it's beautiful up there.
Yeah.
We saw. I guess we went to 3 national parks, maybe 4 in the last time we were there.
Mm-hmm.
Denali is just off the scale. It's so beautiful. We were at Mount Rainier, and Donna said, "It's so beautiful here." I said, "Yeah, you take another Mount Rainier and put it on top of Mount Rainier, you have Denali. So tall."
So is that your favorite one? Is that your favorite one?
So far, well, we like Glacier a whole lot.
Oh,
We've been there
yeah, we
twice.
like Glacier too.
That's just awesome.
Yeah, we're going back to the Tetons in June. We only spent half a day there and that wasn't enough.
Yeah, no, it wouldn't be.
Yeah, Susie got salty. You want to talk about that?
No, you can talk about it.
Is that where y'all pushed them down and tried to
No,
No.
and needed stitches?
no, that was before he got hurt.
What?
We were in Yellowstone, and we had one day in Teton, and we went on one trail with the kids when we go to Jackson Hole and go shopping. I said, we can shop anywhere, like, let's explore the park, and they didn't want to, and I pouted.
They
I
wanted,
ain't gonna lie about it.
they wanted to see Jackson Hole too. We had a kinda, she got a good hike in, and we tried to go to another one called Jenny Lake up there, and we tried to
didn't
get
have time
in
for
there,
it.
and they,
We did Taggart Lake right there at the entrance, and that was it. I'm like, I'm going back one day.
Everybody wanted a t-shirt.
Yeah, they want t-shirt, no picture made under all the banners.
You know, I almost wore my Jackson Hole t-shirt tonight.
We waited until our kids were out of the house to start traveling, so we didn't have to fool with them.
We got one more for to graduate in a couple months, so
Yeah, there you go.
we're about to hit the road.
We were at Jenny Lake and the Tetons, and, we took the boat across and hiked up, and then we were waiting for the boat on the way back. We got caught in a hailstorm, outdoors with no cover.
I know.
It was rough,
'Cause I
about nickel size hail, and,
That happened to us at Grand Prismatic.
Yeah, we're on that boardwalk at Grand Prismatic, which you know is way out there from your parking lot. And a hailstorm came up while we're out on the boardwalk. And you can't, you know,
there's no hiding there.
you know, how you wanna
There was
take,
nothing to get under.
you get off the boardwalk, you're gonna,
Burn.
you'll cook yourself, you know.
We just took off running.
That, hey, when we went we had coming back down Angel, is it called Angel Falls? At Grand Prismatic, we went up that falls and came back down.
Fairy Falls.
Fairy
Fairy
Falls?
Falls.
Okay.
Mhm.
It hailed again right there, you know, look.
But we
Not
just
as bad
put
as the
our
other
stuff on and went anyway. I'm like, you're in Yellowstone, put on your raincoat. We're
Yeah,
going.
yeah.
They got a little mad about that one too, but
What,
they got over it.
We weren't mad at nobody. We weren't mad
What?
at- hell no, we weren't mad at anybody.
It was cold and it was real wet.
well, it had a rainstorm, and then it came hail, so we were soaking wet.
I'm
Had to take the boat across the lake, and it was
Is there any other way to get there? Like, is there, only the one part provides, there's no private ones, cause you can't make reservations. It's
Yeah.
like,
she knows about reservations.
look at the draw
She
there.
does, she's really good at that.
Did you get?
Mark her as your travel agent.
I had already looked, I didn't know what to do, I was panicking.
And then they did away with
What
Park
airline
Pass
was
at
it?
Glacier.
I didn't
If
think,
they did away with
I
Park
was
Pass
just
at
trying to look at
Glacier.
the cheapest one
I-
that was in
I
the
don't
time
like
I
it.
could do on it.
Because it's gonna make
And
you-
then the day before,
Smart.
I'm like,
Parking it once.
Yeah.
Well,
you,
and I was like,
And
oh
now
no,
there's
I
no
wasn't
passes.
like, well, the
Yeah.
next day.
you've got to take a shuttle.
It went back down, not.
You gotta take
as it
the
was,
shuttles that go
like,
from the east side and west side up to Logan Pass.
But you don't know what?
You can't
I
park
do,
up there.
I do.
You gotta get there so early.
Well, they got Nashville, and I think I
Every
lay out
trail, even
and,
on the side of the road, the corner there was packed, and now they're letting everybody in the park, and no, not limiting who's coming in. It's
I
been-
think it's Nashville to
It's,
Denver,
yeah,
and then
it's
Denver
got
to
crazy.
Bozeman.
After COVID,
But I think
the
on the way
major
there
national
were
parks just went
different
completely
airlines
crazy.
going on the way back.
They're backing off of timed entry and reservations. A lot of them are now.
That's what I'm saying, Glacier did away with
I
it.
learned some things on this trip.
You did.
So do y'all get groceries? Or do you have Walmart account? I just did my Walmart pickup. I ordered it from home and sent it to Odessa Walmart. Like, right at the time we were gonna land, and it worked so well.
I don't think, we'll probably, well, we're staying in Cody, Wyoming. The first time was one time we stayed on the, west side in.
Island Park.
Island Park, and we didn't get anything on the east side of the park.
It's time to start. Glad to have you all here. Glenn and Kathy are in Nicaragua, and they will be there next week, so I'll be teaching this week, next week, and then they're out of town the following week, so you got me for 3 weeks. Unless one of you wants to volunteer, and I feel confident that won't happen. So Carrie's gonna lead some prayer, and then we'll get into the book of Titus.
Father, thank you for this day, and thank you for the meal that we were able to share together and the time that we spent visiting across the table with each other. I pray, Father, that you would continue to bless us, and Father, we ask that we would all be engaged in being your servants and serving you by serving our community and our fellow man. I pray that you would be with Lynn and Kathy while they're out of the country. I pray that you would be with Mary Nell and Ray Hawk. Father, so many people are sick and hurting and in the hospital. I pray, Father, that you would heal them and care for them. Please be with David as he presents the thoughts that he has prepared for us. And Father, may we be receptive and participate in the discussion. And it's through your son, Jesus, we pray. Amen.
Good, thank you. I understand Glenn introduced the book of Titus last week and gave us sort of an overview of the whole book. And then maybe talk a little bit more about verses 1 through 4. And so we'll start at about verse 5 here in a minute. But there was a writing project, you divided into groups, and you wrote letters to the ministers, right? Did those get delivered? He didn't tell me if they were delivered yet, or if that was an ongoing project or not. But I think that's nice to do. When I was a minister, it was nice to get some affirmation from time to time. I was working with a guy named Mike in Knoxville, and he called his paycheck my weekly note of encouragement. And often in the ministry, that's all you get. So we're into Titus. My plan is to talk about Titus chapter 1 today, and chapter 2 next week, chapter 3 the week after, and finish it up quickly. And one of the reasons is because Titus, the letter to Titus, echoes a lot of the things we talked about in 1st and 2nd Timothy. For example, this first chapter, it talks a lot about qualifications of elders. Well, that was what 1 Timothy chapter 3 was all about. We talked about that a long time. Most of the qualifications are the same. So, I feel like we've covered some of that already. We can definitely talk about anything that you're interested in when we get to that section. And then the last part of chapter 1 is about false teachers and people who were causing trouble in the church. Well, Timothy had the same problem in Ephesus that apparently that Titus was having here on Crete. So I'm thinking maybe that we don't have to spend a lot of in-depth analysis of these sections because we've talked about them before. If you've been here for a while, I noticed classes changed. It's not really the same class 2 weeks in a row. So we have visitors, we have people in and out, but in general, and as I said, when we get to something, if you have a question, go for it. We'll be glad to talk about it. I titled the first lesson, "Put in order what's left unfinished," because that's what Paul says to Titus in verse 5. He said, "I've left you on Crete so that you can put in order the things that were left unfinished." Now that phrase is translated a lot of different ways. And I think what he says in one verse, it says to set in order that which remained. Well, I think that's a little awkward way of saying things that were left over. And my theory is that maybe Paul was there with Titus and they got things started. Paul had to leave, and so Titus here is going to finish up. Something like that. So a lot of church work sort of falls in that category as well, putting in order things that were left unfinished. As we said about 1st and 2nd Timothy, a lot of what Paul was writing to Timothy was, here's how to do church. Here's how to manage or run or lead a church. And Titus is all the same way. He's telling Titus some practical things to deal with leadership and to deal with problems that come up. And obviously the biggest problem that Titus and Timothy had to deal with was the problem of false teachers. And in this case, there were probably false teachers from within the group, because we'll get to that when we get to that. So, the key points of chapter 1 is a real simple kind of outline to chapter 1. An introduction, which we're not going to go over because Glenn did last week. And then in verses 5 through 9, he talks about how they need to appoint elders, they need to appoint leaders. And Titus was said to appoint elders in every city, every town. So this was over the entire island, I guess, as the area that Titus was working in. And then the last part of the chapter, as I said, is about false teachers. And one writer divided it up like this: appointing elders who love what is good, and then rebuking those who fail to do good. So that's kind of where we're headed. This is Crete. It was not a Greek island at the time. I don't think it is now. It belongs to Greece. And I was noticing as I was looking at all these place names on Crete, none of these really figure into Scripture except the one in the bottom there, Fair Havens, remember that? From the story of Paul's journey to Rome on a boat. And they tried to make it to Fair Havens. You know, it's a sheltered harbor there. So it's the only mention of one of these cities on Crete. So about 7 miles wide at its narrowest, about 37 miles wide at the widest point. It's not a big island, but it's one of the biggest in the Mediterranean, and it's the biggest Greek isle. Crete itself was kind of a rough place. It is off the coast of Greece, about the size of Delaware. One of the Greek words for a liar is kratitzo, and basically it just means to be a Cretan. So they were so known for lying and for bad character that you know, to say you're a liar is to say you're a Cretan. And even today, it's not used very much, but every once in a while you hear somebody refer to somebody as a Cretan. You know, the literature teacher comes up in, I don't know, something old people say, maybe? I don't know.
It's not, but.
You ever been called a Cretan?
No, and I've never heard them call anybody else a Cretan either.
No, I haven't either.
But I've heard it on like
There's
a
so many
movie or
other-
something.
There's so many other good words to call them. I mean, you know.
That's true.
They were infamous for their treachery and their greed. It was kind of a wild, wild west of the ancient Near East. They were known, cities on the islands were known to be unsafe and plagued with violence and sexual corruption. One of the reasons why, maybe, because the Cretans claimed that Zeus was born on their island. They loved to tell stories about his underhanded character, seducing women and lying to get his way. And then I thought about that, and you know, the Psalms and other places in the Scripture talks about people who worship idols, and those who worship them will become like them. That's basically what that verse in Psalms says. And so if you have an island who reveres Zeus, Zeus is a underhanded character, seducing women, lying, well, why not? You know, I mean, you kind of become like what you worship. And I think the point in the Psalms is that, you know, people worship this rock that can't think or talk or feel, and they become like that, become people who are unfeeling. But the Greek gods were, well, they were a little wild. They were very loose morals. They were very capricious. You know, you might get struck down on the spot if you did something wrong. You know, it's these stories of the Greek gods, and Roman gods for that matter, were not the kind of God that we worship. And so they're worshiping that kind of a situation. They're worshiping, Siri is talking to me. They worship in that kind of environment and become like that. And so that may be part of the reasons that Cretans ended up the way they were. The island, though, it had a lot of strategic harbors, and where it's situated, I think Paul thought this could be the launching point for ministry in the whole area. And I think that's what he was hoping Titus would do on the island. So in spite of all of the problems there was some opportunity there as well. At least as in my mind of what Paul was trying to do with Titus because of its location. So, you know, I think it goes without saying that Titus had been given a very challenging mission. And one of the points, when we get to the end, I have some summary of some more practical points. And one of them is some ministry jobs are more challenging than others. And, you know, if you've ever lived in a lot of places and dealt with a lot of churches, you know that to be the case. And sometimes it's because of the community, and sometimes it's because of the church. But, and he says in verse 5, I left you in Crete so that you may put things in order. Let's read a little bit down here, this first section, 5 through 9. This is why I left you in Crete, that you might put in order what remained in order. Finish up what was unfinished. Appoint elders in every town as I directed you. If anyone is above reproach, the husband of one wife, his children are believers, and not open to the charge of debauchery and insubordination. For an overseer, as God's steward, must be above reproach. He must not be arrogant, or quick-tempered, or a drunkard, or violent, and grieve gain, but hospitable and lover of good, self-controlled, upright, holy, and disciplined. He must hold firm to the trustworthy word as taught, so that he may be able to give instruction in sound doctrine and also to rebuke those who contradict it. And that little section, to rebuke those who contradict it, is an introduction to the next section about people who were doing exactly that. So what the NIV says, Paul left Timothy to put in order that was left unfinished. And we talked about that a minute ago. The Holman Christian Standard Bible says to set right what was left undone. And I think when you talk about ministry, there's always something undone, always something that has yet to be done. And it echoes what Paul told Timothy in 1 Timothy 3. It says, basically the larger context says, if I'm delayed, I'm writing you this letter, if I'm delayed, so that you will know how people ought to conduct themselves in God's household, and he goes on and says, which is the pillar and the ground of truth, which is church. And I feel like that's the same sort of thing that he's telling Titus here. There's some things that are left unfinished. You need to get them in order. Some people's idea of order is different than others. If you were a freak student back in the day with President E. Cole Carter, you knew the phrase, all things done decently and in order, which meant do it my way. But, you know, and in churches, some churches are more orderly than others. But here Titus he's been given a job to set things in order, which is a big job when you're dealing with church work. Titus was being told to finish the work Paul had started. And I think in many ways, he's echoed, Paul tells Timothy this same thing, 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 2, where he says, the things you've heard from me, teach to others so that they can teach others. Well, that's what Paul was doing with Titus. And so, it's a good pattern for us as well. One of the best ways to teach is just one-on-one and talking to people and pouring yourself into the lives of an individual or a few individuals so that they can pass on that with others. We do a lot in the church in big groups, but I think we need to do more with mentoring in small groups. And that's what Paul was doing with Timothy and with Titus. I think by the time that Paul wrote this letter, most people think it's between the two Roman imprisonments, okay? May actually be after 1 Timothy and before 2 Timothy. Of course, we don't know those things exactly, but Paul had to be understanding by then that his life was kind of winding down, and it was time to pass things on to younger men, which Timothy and Titus both were. And when we studied 2 Timothy chapter 4, we have that section where Paul says, I finished the course, I've run the race, I've got this crown waiting for me. I'm being poured out like a drink offering. I think he realized that his life was near an end. And I'll be 70 in a couple months. I kind of have that feeling that, time to pass some things on to people who are younger than me, because I'm not always going to be here. I know that's kind of a hard thing for us to think about, but passing things on to the next generation. I think that was what Paul was doing.
I have a question.
Sure.
So if we need to do more of that, how do we do it?
One-on-one. Well, I can just give examples from my own life. I grew up in Illinois, in a little church, and we finally got a preacher. His name was Burl, and he really saw some potential in me. He let me work with, he brought in kids from Freed Hardeman in the summers. I was 15, they were 18 to 22 or whatever. He let me work with them. I did everything they did that summer. And I think that sort of individual attention, taking somebody under your wing, Kayla's asking, if you're going to pass it on to the next generation, how do you do that? So how would you do that? How would you do that?
Don't you think that's the basis of the question?
You can't imagine anybody younger than you, right?
That's not true. I think that I have a lot of thoughts about this, and I would really like to have a solution for it, but the problem is when you have lots of thoughts, you don't necessarily always understand the hindrances.
Okay,
So I would like to know what it is that's stopping us from doing it more frequently.
that's a good question.
Okay,
Our busy lives.
Busy lives.
Getting it right.
so what do we do about that?
Don't be busy, get out of the rut. I don't know.
You get more comfortable.
Get more comfortable, he says.
God wants us out of our comfort
I think it's gotta be intentional, right? A lot of times in churches of this size, at least, we pay somebody to take care of our young people. Maybe we need to be in there more. I don't know, when I was a parent of a kid in the youth group, I was much more involved, but, you know, we tend to get out of that involvement when our kids get a little bigger. Maybe we shouldn't.
There have been some attempts here, like remember when they put the teenagers' names and you went to a table and picked them and had the birth date and you were supposed to write them and it took off for a couple of months and then it fizzled.
Yeah, as it often would. I just remember when Jonathan was he was playing baseball in a league in Knoxville, and one of his coaches was, do you remember his name? His name was John something. He was in his 80s, 82, 83 at the time. He was coaching, Jonathan was probably 12, somewhere around in there. And this guy didn't have a kid on the team, didn't have a grandkid on the team, didn't have a great-grandkid on the team. He just loved coaching, had been coaching for years and years. So, yeah, I guess it takes something like that, where you stop looking down your road and turn back and look at people behind you and realize, you know, I've got to help them learn the things that I learned. Any other ideas? I'm not good at this.
Well, I definitely don't have it all figured out, but one thing that I do think would be really helpful is if we would be intentional, not only about, like everybody said, being busy and being uncomfortable and being unfocused on it. It is a real hindrance because we are all of those things. And we're not going to stop being all of those things overnight and switch and be Paul and have a Titus and have a Timothy. We're not. And so I guess what I think is it's one thing for us to say we should do it, and it's another thing to figure out how we're going to do it. And I think intentionality, which you said, is really important. But I think intentionality only happens. Well, yes, but you will only continue in your intentionality if you find connection.
Right.
And not everyone is meant to connect in the same way with everyone. And so it's easy when you try and you pick up your card at the table to give up after you've done your thing because you've checked your box, but without real connection, you won't perpetuate that. And so we're seeing the effects of the connection that Paul and Timothy and Titus had with one another. And so while we can't manufacture, I can't hand out a card and say, you're my new Titus, you know? I can pray that in my efforts to be intentional, God will bring me to the person who needs my wisdom and bring the person to me who I need their zeal.
I've been around long enough. I think that the best examples of this happening are not part of a church program. I think maybe hand out the cards, maybe, you know, that sort of thing could get kicked. I mean, it could like,
Start.
yeah, maybe, but I would say maybe 2, 3, 5% of those would actually, you know, work on a long-term basis, but that's worth the investment of a church program. You realize that from the beginning, it's not gonna be 100%. But the best of this, I think, just happens organically and individual. You see somebody, I mean, you gotta start with your own kids and grandkids, those of us who are older and have kids and grandkids, or great-grandkids, anybody who knows that. You gotta pour yourself into those folks, for sure. But, you know, just to be honest with Donna, our grandchildren are 20 hours away by car, so we need to find some other folks to do stuff like that with, you know, and we have in some places. We have this girl that comes over our house right regularly, because she lives in the neighborhood, and we're trying our best, but she's just not.
Little waiver.
No, a blessing is what you want. So,
Yeah, I think part of it is that we need to be trained, we need to learn how to do it. Because it's not an organized thing, we all need to be able to do it. And we need to do it on our own, at our own pace, with the connections of the people that we can connect with. And it's not an organized program, but the training might be. There needs to be some kind of training so we know what to do.
We're working on it.
yeah, intergenerational stuff has been a buzzword in churches for a while. And we need to do more than that, more of that. Okay, let's, I'm gonna move on. Let's talk about elders a little bit. How many elders are, we got former elder, current elder, couple of current, four current elders. So, we'll talk about you in front of your face. The word for elder here is presbyteros, and I just want to bring this up, that the idea of a church leader has three different terms that are applied in Scripture, okay? Sometimes they're called episkopos. 1 Timothy 3, says that if a man desires the office of, I think King James says bishop, overseer, that's episkopos, but it's the same job. And then in Ephesians 4, you have them called shepherds, 1 Peter chapter 5. And each one of those sort of, to me, emphasizes a different job that an elder does. And like presbyteros, the older and wiser. I think a lot of this word has a context of leadership. This is the direction we're going to go. It has that aspect of the older person. This is the word that's used of the elders of Israel, which were older people. And we generally in our churches have appointed elders who were a little older. We have some exceptions, some younger men, but in general, Terry, I guess, Terry and I are a couple of the oldest among the group, so older men. Episcopal overseers taking care of the church. I think of this as more of the administrative load, which frankly we've tried to get rid of as much as possible. I don't think elders do a good job who spend all their time administrating things. Get other people to do that. I think my own opinion is that the third area, appointing shepherd, is one of the things we ought to be spending the most of our time with, because people need shepherding. People need taken care of. Unfortunately, my opinion only, shepherding is the hardest job, by far the hardest job. And figuring out paint colors and carpeting is an easy job. And so, over the years, elders tend to gravitate toward the easy and away from the hard. Is that a fair statement? It has been in my experience, not here. I think we've been very intentional about getting away from that. People come up and ask me, for those of you visiting, I'm one of the elders, so I'm stepping on my own toes. People come up to me and ask me, what's going on with such and such? I don't know. And in the back of my mind, I'm saying, I'm kind of glad about that, because that happened without having to go through the elders. It's just one of those administrative things. Maybe they folks decided to change up the room arrangement somewhere, I don't know, or something in the education department. Elders don't have to know everything that's going on. That's the overseer job, and we do have to have that job to some degree. But I think that we need to be really emphasizing that shepherding thing. That's sort of a side job, because Titus didn't talk about that. Some of the roles that does seem to be neglected more than others. I was interested in this term in verse 7, that elders to be God's steward. Okay, so what is a steward?
Caretaker?
Okay, a caretaker of somebody else's stuff, right? So I think that as we're elders and understand the eldership, that what we do is we're taking care of God's stuff. We're being stewards. And I think that we're, Terry, we're gonna be held accountable for how well we take care of God's stuff. And the main thing that God has given us to take care of is the people, right? I think church buildings are a wonderful thing, and it's a very good thing to have, but they can be a real drain on the congregation and a drain on the administrative load of what goes on in the church. I've often wondered, one of the things we may talk about, it seems like what Paul was telling Timothy to do was set up elders over the various cities, and probably in those cities, what the elders were over were house churches. 4, 5, 8, 10, whatever, house churches, but the elders would be over each of those, over a group of those, not an elder over each house church. Probably was the way they were organized back then. I thought of an analogy for that, and that may be like here, if some reason we couldn't meet at all, the laws changed, the disease, something worse than COVID came along, we can't meet at all, then we might just say that we're going to meet in houses around, or like maybe life groups would meet, but the elders would still be over that group of life groups or house churches. I think that was what's going on in the first century. But he says God's steward, and that really hit me hard, I guess maybe as an elder. I realized I'm not in charge of anything. I'm given the job of taking care of what God has put with me around and in my area of influence. And the most important thing is the people. Any other thoughts about that? Is there any characteristic or qualification of an elder that you'd especially like to talk about? If you've ever had a question about
Well, I was just wondering, having listened to you describe these people, liars, sexually immoral, did Titus go, where am I gonna find people that fit these qualifications?
Yeah.
These are new Christians
Yeah.
coming out of a culture that's,
Yeah, well, farther down in the last section, Paul talks about Cretans and says, that their own poet, who was Epimenides, had said they're liars and lazy gluttons, and then Paul says this is true. And I got this mental image of this letter being read around the various churches on the island. Well, what's going on there? But it was, he had a very difficult job. I was asked to do some leadership training for a church in the Bahamas. I know it's a tough job, somebody had to do it. But one of the problems they had there in appointing elders was that living relationships were really different than they are here. There's hardly anybody in the church who hadn't been divorced. And for this church, that was a problem. So how do you train leaders when you have it was just one of those things that's a different culture than we have here. And I found myself at a bit of a loss trying to transplant leadership principles from here over there. The elders get emails from time to time from churches and other places, and one of them, I guess somewhere along the line, answered a question. You know what I'm talking about. And this preacher had in Africa, or maybe India. I haven't looked it up where it is. Wanted me to help them appoint elders and deacons. Well, I would be at a loss to know how to help them appoint elders and deacons on the other side of the world. It's different in every community. So any others? Did you answer your question, Mary? Yeah. Any others that stand out at you that you want to talk about? Like I said, we talked about these things before. Okay.
I was sitting here listening God's steward and thinking about the parable of the guy that gives his people 1 talent, 2 talents, and 5, and is that a responsibility of us that we're stewards for God's people here, and if we've got a 5-talent person that we're just ignoring, and they could grow, or they could, is that just kind of hit me as far as 1 talent, 2 talent, 5 talent. Are we responsible? Maybe reaching out to people and moving them. I don't know. It just hit me.
Well, did anyone else wanna tackle that one? I don't have to answer all the questions. Tag that on.
Well, I guess the thought that comes to me about it is just kind of, we don't know in the beginning. You can look at somebody who is,
Oh, you don't know them yet.
give me a second.
Okay.
When people come to Christ, or even before they come to Christ, there's no way for us to know who is a 1-talent person, or a 3-talent person, or a 5-talent person. And without the love of God in their lives, and without the influence of people who are willing to show and teach that, we won't ever find out. And verily, it's not for us to know, but they will not meet their potential without coming into further contact with the love of God and His teachings and knowledge.
And sometimes without being challenged to take on something new that they didn't know they could do. You know, a 1-talent person can become a 5-talent person just by using, learning. You can learn new skills. I think of the Ephesians 4 passage where Paul talks about how he's appointed different people in the church, and the leaders, he say, were appointed there to equip God's people for works of service. And so I think one of the jobs of elders is to equip people. And I think that's what Kayla's talking about, helping people find their talent. And one of the ways I think you've helped people find their talent is just you talk them into doing something they're uncomfortable with.
Well, that's what you described, with, you being kind of brought in to the preacher.
Yeah.
Earl. Yeah. I mean, you didn't know what you were capable of, hanging around and doing what others were doing until you were doing it. Had experience doing it, somebody was willing to let you do it,
I was kind of the halftime guy. I learned a lot from those guys. It was a great experience.
But like you were saying, Ephesians 4:16, from him the whole body joined and held together by every sporting limb grows and builds itself up in love as each one does its work.
But I think before that, what he says is that's the goal, and it doesn't happen accidentally. It's got to be intentional, and it's the job of the leaders to help put those. I use the metaphor of a jigsaw puzzle. Get the whole thing. I mean, what you got is chaos, and many churches you got that. So you want to get all the puzzle pieces there. You got to turn them over. You got to find where they go, and the red one's over here. You got the job, but when you're done, you got a picture. And the picture on the box in our case is not a church building, but it's Jesus himself. That's what we want the church to look like. So yeah, I think that's one of the things we're stewards of, right? Is that where we started with this?
David, I got a question. Those words that you have up there, that's common vernacular in our modern church language, like a shepherd, an overseer. And we use those, I guess, like Presbyterian, Episcopalian, that's where some of those come from. Do you know how the church at that point would have interpreted that? Like, you'd be a shepherd. Like, that's not the Jewish language or even maybe Roman and Gentile. Or you think would that be like today, so you need to be a foreman of the church? Like, you see what I'm saying? Like, I wonder how they interpreted those.
Well, most of the words that the writers of the Bible picked up were normal words that were used, and like you say, like especially presbyteros and episkopos have been used as to describe the way certain churches are organized, right? I don't know exactly how they would have read that. The idea of episkopos as an overseer, would be like the boss at work, that kind of person, or military commander, have people under him. So presbyteros, they would have understood that to be older men, older leaders. That was the technical term for certain eye problems is presbyopia. What, like nearsighted in that? Well, that's from this idea of, that's what older people get. Right, so they would have understood that to be older. And the Jews especially would have there you go. The Jews especially would have understood that leaders were older men, that's what their community had always been. You know, if you get to be a certain age, then you can maybe be a leader. Any other questions? I'm going slower than I meant to go, but, you know, we'll see what goes. I thought it was interesting, it was appointed by Titus and Timothy. These elders were appointed by the evangelists. That's not how we do it today. So, has anybody known of a church where the leaders were appointed by the preacher?
Wasn't Timothy young?
Timothy was, yeah, Paul says, don't let anybody here down to you because you're a young man. Of course, that man, anything under 40 would have been considered young.
So he was appointing people that were probably older than him.
Yeah, more than likely. Okay, this question. How would you appoint elders? How do you think a church should appoint elders? You know how we've done it here, you've been here for that. You know, how should a church appoint elders?
I actually have a question along those lines. So like, I've been to a lot of churches that are like really, really small, and so they don't have like elders.
Yeah.
But there are men who are basically like doing the job of an elder, but they don't have that like title.
Mhm.
So like how, I guess it's a twofold question. Number one, I don't know how to say this, not thorny, but is that wrong? And number two, like how do you go about encouraging like official appointing of elders if it is?
Has anybody grown up been a part of a church that didn't have elders but had a few leading men? You been there? Was it wrong? I think, what I think of is not ideal, but you do the best you can with what you have, right? So, you know, what if you didn't have a lot of men in the congregation and you wanted, you know, what do you do then? I mean, I think certain situations require certain adaptations to that. But I think you hold up as the ideal. We want to get elders. We want to be scripturally organized the way the churches in the New Testament work. But I think we understand the reality of the fact sometimes, well, you know, one of the first qualifications of an elder is a man who desires the office, you know. So there have been people that I have thought would make great elders, but they didn't want the job. So it's kind of a, what do the rest of you all, in your experience with these churches that didn't have elders?
Seen also where people like really, really try to like fit this mold just perfectly, and like it's a small church and they've got 2 elders and then one passes away, like now we've got to dissolve the eldership because there's only one and it's not plural. And so like where it's just so granular, almost like it's
And that's something we have to deal with. I've known of a church had 2 elders and they couldn't get along, and so one of them resigned, so the other one would have to resign. That seems to be a little sharp stick in the eye kind of a situation, not really the way Jesus would do things. So, yeah, what do you do? Keith?
I've been involved in churches that have asked other elderships to oversee some of the stuff, you know, questions of an elder, how to handle it, because they get form a group of people that can be nominated or selected as elders there. To give you an example, when West End goes national, there was the church in Nashville sent a group of men out to an area to start a church, and they got a group of people together, and they just kind of grew it with the oversight of the elders, advising them until they could pick out people in that congregation that would fit the role. That's the way they resolved it. So now they have elders and deacons, and it's just kind of growing from that. But
Yeah, well, maybe that's a good model to use, churches helping one another. Yeah.
So the way I look at it is a title doesn't make you any smarter or more qualified. Jesus didn't start preaching after he announced himself. He started preaching as a child. Nobody knew who this child was, so that doesn't make him any less qualified to do his job.
Okay, so I'm trying to put together what
So-
you're saying there.
The title, but this kind of goes back to what she was saying, like, is it wrong to not have the title of elder? As long as the qualifications are there, the desire to nourish the people that are following you and be there for them and help them build in their Christianity, then I don't see why that would be a problem.
But there's one theory of an eldership, an elder process, is that we don't create elders, we just recognize people who are already doing the work of an elder, who have people that they're shepherding, basically. And so I think that is one thing, the title doesn't make a man an elder. He sort of qualifies himself and then he's recognized. I did know, well, you know, 1st, 2nd, 3rd John, 2nd John, I believe, talks about a guy named Diotrephes who loved to have the preeminence. In small churches, you sometimes have people who are not qualified to be an elder, but they still want to run things. And it can be very destructive. You know, and then sometimes with small churches with no elders, you have a preacher who wants to run things. And so I would say that there may have been at one time or another a preacher who just wasn't real excited about appointing elders because then they would be in charge and he wouldn't be. I can just imagine a situation like that. So it opens up a lot of possibilities in leadership. Where were we? How do you feel about the preacher appointing elders? Is that one of those situations in this case where that's the best system they had? Or is there a better system?
I guess I just wonder, you know, when you say that Titus and Timothy appointed them, don't you think they would have to because they weren't from these places either. So when they showed up, don't you think they would have to go about collecting information from the people who were already there?
This is not a day one job, right?
And so I guess I'm just saying, it's not like they walked into the church and they were like, you're the elder now. They were doing it I guess I would assume, with the help of the people who were already there.
Oh, yeah.
So maybe they were just, establishing, we need to find some more, firm or, appointed leadership. We need to make it clear that these people are in charge.
Well, you need to do teaching about it, you need to study about it, you need to challenge people to grow into that kind of a leader, I think, yeah. I don't expect that Titus was appointing leaders at random the first day. No, he had to get to know them and find out who was willing and who was qualified. And in a place like Crete, I expect that to be very, very difficult. Yeah. The Bible doesn't tell us some important things. Have you noticed that? And one of them is how to appoint elders. And another interesting one, it talks about deacons. Never, and I've said this, never does it say what a deacon does or what it's supposed to do. It's just that we're left to figure out and do the best we can. And I think that's, if you go to a lot of different churches, you'll find that they have a lot of different systems for appointing elders. There are some churches that they do voting, they vote on their elders. There are certain churches where elders every few years will stand for affirmation that the congregation still supports them as being an elder. Maybe you've had experience with these. I think each church sort of has to figure out for themselves the best way to do that because the Bible doesn't tell you how to appoint an elder. Unless you want to get real sticky about it and say, well, the preacher does because that's what Timothy and Titus do. We've got a couple of minutes. Any other questions? Observations? I'm not going to finish the whole chapter.
But there was an established Jewish population on the side.
There was. Mm-hmm. And obvious from the next section, part of those Jews had become Christians and were causing problems because they were teaching, which was prevalent at the time, that you couldn't become a Christian unless you became a Jew first. And they were preaching especially circumcision and dietary laws and the things that were the easily noticed outward signs of Judaism. So yes, they were. We'll talk about more of that week. Next week, I think we're done. Appreciate y'all being here.
Hey, Jason, how many you think Ashley and Chris have?
15.
18.
He knows where to go.
Maybe debate too, possibly.
Where'd he go?
You need to start a mentor.
Him and Robert were sharing messages and I was including on the screen.
Yeah. I just can't do it.
You're mentoring people who will
Maybe it was the, crawfish.
They could have been, but he was throwing something.
That's kind of what we're gonna get this next thing on the ground.
I know Charles said that they experiment with different colors all the time. They don't use the same color. Every
I just
time
wonder
they
where
go.
they went to get those fish.
I don't know.
Cause he said they were going to Shiloh.
Yeah, he didn't say on this. Robert did ask him, but he said, are the fish reloading at Shiloh? He needed to anyway. Twice as many. Hey, how hard was Ashley working? How hard?
I mean, you know, that's, again, that's their, I told Susie, I said, I
Whatever it is that
caught our keepers today in places I've never fished in my life.
we
Yeah.
want
I mean,
you to have
it's different. You gotta learn how to fish those lines.
come meet you
I mean,
I want Leona.
A lot of times
I'm losing my touch.
knowing where to go for that information.
And encourage you to be willing to give and be willing to pay.
But
We've had a lot worse days.
y'all dig it, y'all need to dig it out.
My plan is to.
Dig out where they were at.
Okay.
Well, like with the
You would've had enough for dinner if you were hungry.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we wouldn't have gone hungry.
I did have a student
on
That's a
how
lot.
we can feel more open.
18.
Community.
Why don't Dad take any and fry 'em up?
And how we can
Cause I'm too lazy to
teach
clean.
other.
Actually, I don't have all this.
Doesn't
Yeah, I'm
have
not
people, so they can
fillet and knife.
Well, I didn't bring you some fillets for you to eat tomorrow.
I got them if you want them.
And I
I
told
hate to
Jenny,
do that.
I really.
Why? We don't need that many.
I'm trying to figure out what I'm fixing to do with them.
I'll cheer for you. I won't do anything, but I'll cheer for you.
Okay, well,
I might bag them and freeze them, but they never get eaten if you freeze them.
But if you, I told Jenny.
I'll eat 'em.
If it would put him out. I really like to hear
If you're ready to cook them, you mean me to forgive you some or what?
I want you to cook them and invite me over to eat them.
Clean them, cook them.
Eat 'em too.
Me and Caesar going out of town this weekend.
Where you going?
Nashville. Our anniversary's Friday.
Okay.
I know, I told him just.
Anniversary, how many, that'd be 25?
Seven.
Kid was 18. They must have got on the spot, cause they didn't have, they had about the same look as 15, you know, before.
I'm so excited. I worked on something. Absolutely, you're overlooked. I completely feel that way, that's why I don't. I just insert myself into everything else. You know, children, teenagers, young married, young parents. We don't exist. Yeah. I count myself as a widow. I mean, that's who I hang out with the most. John, Brown, Trump,
Probably hang out with the middle-aged men the most.
And another thing that we've been is, so, we got I'm wondering about.
Everybody was lying, we're just kidding, they're very nice.
They're very nice.
Things have changed.
It was Titus.
We went to Heracleon and Gnosis.
I remember you saying, yes, but I couldn't figure out what the second part was.
Yeah, it wasn't on the map, I think it's a modern city.
Okay.
It's the capital. No.
So it was a Superman.
Crete.
So you were in the,
It's really cool.
that had the big
Crete is actually actually really old, like 3,000 plus years old, and there are a group of people there called the Minoans.
That was so good.
And have you ever heard of the Minotaur?
I have heard of the Minotaur.
That was him. So like, here's the myth. There's this king named Minos, and he was like filthy rich.
The one who everything he touched turned to gold.
Oh yeah, I think so. I mixed this up.
Yeah, Midas. And his golden thumb.
Okay, yeah, this is a different guy. Sorry.
Okay, well, I knew it was close.